Right before we get launched into the chill season of 2023 was a major tournament called 20XX Number 5, where a number of the best Western teams and a few from Japan collided. This tournament ended up shaping a good bit of discussion about the weird spot the game is in, which is for arguably the first time, there isn't really a meta. What does this mean, and is it actually the good news it seems like it is? That's what we're going to talk about today while breaking down the top 2 comps from FT and Fiesta. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more tournament breakdowns from me, be sure to subscribe and let's get started. So what does it mean that there isn't a meta? Well, Jared from Jackpot talked about it on Twitter saying, meta doesn't exist right now besides fighting good team fights and mechanics with occasional special coordination. Having a meta implies there is the most effective way to win. But it literally just doesn't exist because no one knows what is consistent and what isn't. This isn't to say that there aren't certain options that are more common. For example, pretty much every team has a tacticooler all the time, but it means there isn't a set composition of things that are reliably working against everything else in the game. People are always swapping around depending on what they're going against. While that sounds good on paper, FLC has a bit of a different take on it. A year ago, I was saying that Machine and Splash aren't too good. They're just good kits in a game full of terrible kits. Today's discourse is the reason I made that distinction. A game full of equally bad options leads to... Okay, so for the 99% of us that don't know what that means, basically, it's having a bunch of options that are similar to each other. He goes on to say, a metagame is just what everyone else is doing. The reason we talk about it is because if we know what everyone else is doing, we can use the options in the rest of the game to figure out a way to beat it. But if none of the options work, the only choices left to you are in your playstyle. Basically, even though there are many different strong weapons or specials or options in the game, there is no combination of them that is currently strong enough to work reliably against everything. So a lot of this is coming down to teams' individual playstyle, weapon preferences, etc. As we'll get to later, the second place team FT had this conversation a bit before the tournament, where they talked about not knowing what they could play, and Kyo said, "Next scrim, don't ask. Literally pick a weapon you like best and click A. I'm so serious." Obviously, at the end of the day, FT still had comps that made sense, and we'll get to those later, but a lot of it was picked around what weapons they liked. For example, Biscuit played Nautilus, one of his best weapons mechanically throughout his competitive career. So the positives of this are pretty obvious. There's a lot of different things that can work, and you're not really required to pick very many things, again with some exceptions like Cooler. However, to talk about the downsides, let's go back to what FLC meant by a lot of options being weak. Because there's no comp in the game that's super strong right now, it's hard to build a comp where things kind of function properly. Most comps right now that are being picked by good teams still have a lot of holes and flaws in them. And while that can be good to some extent, at the point we're in right now, it's to a degree where it feels like every comp you have just doesn't feel that good to play. Obviously, Double Crab meta had its problems, but picking good comps there felt like you had good comps. This isn't the case right now, even with some of the best comps. You can legitimately pick a composition full of top tiers and have it still feel weak at times. The other problem is that while there's a lot of different weapons, there isn't a lot of different playstyles. Tent in this game, when being played alongside a team, can just be meshed in like normal, like Jackpot did in Mahi Zones, for example. You don't really play that differently because you have a tent. Sure, there's some small things that change, but compared to Splatoon 2, where tent comps would have an entirely different way of playing the game, tent comps in this game still play the same way. In fact, pretty much every comp in this game plays the same way. It's just composed of different pieces. Basically, while there's a diversity of weapons, there is not a diversity of playstyles. This converged into a conversation on Cooler and people talking about how it makes some of the other modes weaker where you have to cross the map, like Kyo said, and I brought up the fact that people don't like the special saver aspect, which is something I've pointed out since the test fire, because getting all your specials back after wiping is dumb, but that's a conversation for another time. No one has found a composition that could really stand up to everything and be powerful as a whole in total. And so playing to your own team strengths is really important because everyone's still playing the same way, so you need to play something you'll be able to be good at. So let's take a look at the two approaches to this. There's FT where they tried to play much closely to the style of their players, and there's Fiesta, who basically goes for the building a good comp attribute. Like I mentioned before, FT did what they felt better individually. Kyo would play a bunch of different Slayer weapons, such as Splatana Wiper or V-Machine. Biscuit primarily stuck with Nautilus. Zera's stuck with Stamper, the main weapon he usually plays, and University, instead of opting to go with Pencil, which is what they tried before, played Zap so they could be more aggressive and do the backlist comp. That's basically what FT1 has been known for over the years. While they definitely had some close games with teams like Jackpot, this strategy did seem to work for the most part, and outside of their loss at the end to Fiesta, they ended up doing really good in this tournament. I do want to point out that their comps still had strengths. They had stuff that was mid-range when it was needed. They had a variety of specials as an entry tool. They had Cooler, they had plenty of paint, etc, etc. I don't want people to get off on the wrong foot and think you can randomly pick a low tier or not have any specials that get you in, etc. There is still some amount of thought process being built in here. It's just that FT1 is playing around, okay, this is the stuff we want to play. What is the least amount we have to change to run things that are good to play the game the way we want to? Which worked out well for them. Fiesta, on the other hand, while still having weapons that they're of course good with, had a comp that's a lot more standard. The main way this was done was by having 4 weapons that all actually have good kits in the game. You have V-Shot with Suction Zuka 190p, V-Dooley with Suction Crab 190p, and Zap and Tri-Slosher with either Suction Fizzy 190 or Fizzy Cooler 200, and finally Rapid Blaster Deco for most maps, which while it is 210p on a blaster, is still Torpedo and Inkjet on a Rapid. These are all good main, sub, and special weapons with solid special output, and arguably the 4 best specials in the game at their disposal. This means that the comp has a lot of flexibility when it's needed. If they need to play around bomb spam, play around aggressive, paint, AoE, whatever it is, they have access to those. And whenever specials come out, they're sure to have the ones that have the most impact on the game. There aren't a lot of kits that are as good as these, and running 4 of them in the same team is surprisingly uncommon. And it seems like this strategy worked out quite well for them, as they were able to win the tournament with a bracket reset. However, of course, their strategy isn't perfect, and they actually had quite a considerable amount of game losses throughout the whole tournament, including almost having their run ended earlier 2-3 to Duck Mafia, a team like FT1 that plays a lot closer to what they're comfortable with, using things like Octobrush Nouveau for Red Shell. So here's my take on it. I think what we're going to end up with is some compromise of these options. I think players are definitely going to want to have a preference to what weapons they want to use. However, the stronger your comp can be while being something you're comfortable with is something that clearly has an impact on the matches, and I think we'll see team comps slowly get more optimal as time goes on. Realistically though, I don't think we're going to figure out this meta entirely before the next patch, and considering it's a new season that's going to add more new options alongside a balance patch, who knows how long this era will last. Still though, this is one of the best times to be a theory crafter, to try to push your own unique weapons and options that you have, and while it isn't perfect and there's definitely still a lot of downsides that I talked about earlier, it is at least a very interesting time to see what develops. So, what do you think we'll see next? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.